what I was talking about is the fact that during these times, with all the shifts in the environment, with everything that's happening, it is not a failure to feel stressed. I was saying that I have a lot of clients that are feeling stressed right now that wouldn't normally, and they are worried that's they're somehow failing at their process. But there's a lot going on right now. So between the earthquakes we're having here in Utah and people being out of work or worrying about getting sick, or worrying about how the government's handling things, how well they're handling the money that was supposed to go to small business that all these big corporations have taken, or worrying about whether or not they're going to be able to pay their rent or go back to work. People that think that the government isn't handling it properly, that we shouldn't be shut down. Any of these things are triggers because there is something unfamiliar happening for us. So if we have any primal mechanisms at all, we're going to feel that trigger. And so it's not uncommon to feel stress at this point. Now, what's really important is that we understand that stress is not a failure, it's a brain function. And addressing the stress won't work because it's just a result of brain function. If we can approach the brain function, we're going to do better. So I was talking about how I come from this place where I had severe PTSD. I had anxiety. I was defensive. I was insecure. I was scared all of the time. Every night, the minute it got dark, that was it. I was in a fear state until it was light again. I had so many deep fears. And that was just the result of my brain function. So to try and approach all that at the level of the experience is really impossible. So what we really want to do is approach it at the level of the brain function. So what we're going to do is we're going through these phase 1 practices. But what I want to do is just approach these one at a time. So what I'm going to do is start, and then I'm going to describe why it works. So I want to go into detail on them, and that's what tonight's brain hack is all about. So again, post your questions, post your comments, share with us things that you're stressed about, and I'll get specific about ways you can specifically manage that stress through a practice. So the first practice I'd like to talk about is lying on the floor. Now I always begin with this. This is listed first in my phase 1 exercise options. So if you want a copy of this document you're seeing, you can go to my store at inspiredevolutionproject.com. Click store from the main menu, and then go to, in the very first row, you'll see the free course that I offer. In addition to that free course, you'll see some practice journals. So we'll say phase 1 practice journals. That will include this list along with some journal pages to practice phase 1 on. It's free, so there's no charge to download it, but it's great. It gives you this list handy, and you can make notes all over it to see what works for you. So this one that's lying on the floor, let's start there, and then I'm just going to go through each one at a time. We have about a half an hour, and so I'm going to go through all of them and then answer any questions anybody might have, and we're going to call that the brain hack for tonight. So this lying on the floor, what happens is this. So when the body is in an extreme state of distress, so when it's in too intense a situation, right? People can have it happen from heat stroke. People can have it happen from stress. I think all the time of the goats that faint. There are people that faint when they get stressed. It can be holding our breath too long. Or I remember when I was in Glee Club in junior high, I would stand and lock my knees, and it cuts off the circulation in your legs. So that would make people pass out, right? All these things are the brain recognizing, measuring the homeostasis of the body, checking in with the interoceptive systems, and seeing that the body is under distress. And so in response to that distress, the brain makes us lose consciousness and buckles our knees, which causes us to fall to the floor. Because the first thing we have to realize is the fact that we can stand at all, the fact that we are a person that stands means our brain's functioning. So your brain is running the whole time you stand. It's measuring homeostasis, it's adjusting balance, it's continually working. How the heart and lungs work is different lying down than standing up. So the brain is making all of these adjustments all of the time. And so it's the thing that tells your knees to buckle, to drop you to the floor, right? Because you can not have consciousness and still walk and stand. That's what sleepwalkers do. They're not conscious, but yet they're still able to stand. So what the brain is doing is it's putting you on the floor. But the brain understands that when you're on what it considers the floor, now that floor can be in a 3rd-story apartment, it can be on the grass, it can be on the dirt, it can be on the ground, it doesn't matter, but it can't be in a bed or on a couch because the brain perceives that differently because it's been conditioned to understand those are the places we sleep. And so if it's lying on the floor, what it does is it returns to rest and digest. So we know this about the brain, right? This is common knowledge that if we are in fight or flight, if the amygdala triggers, when we go into fight or flight, the prefrontal cortex shuts down and we go into this automated state. Well, when we go back into rest and digest, the amygdala shuts down. So it's always one or the other happening in a primal state. And so when we lie on the floor, the brain says, oh, okay, a tiger is not chasing me right now. So fight or flight means a tiger is chasing me. And the brain is saying that right at this specific moment, a tiger's not chasing me. So I can go ahead and I can rest and digest. So what happens is the body goes into a recovery state. So this is when we're in a recovery state with the body from having been in stress. And so lying on the floor will always work. This is a great thing for if you're a person that experiences a lot of stress. Lying on the floor is a really great way to relieve stress instantly, and it always works, no matter how advanced you get in being able to manage stress. Anytime you hit a stressful state, anytime you're in a state that's even mildly uncomfortable, lying on the floor will improve it. So I do recommend that. This is one of the go-tos I use for people that suffer a lot of anxiety is just this, because it's mechanical, because it's driven by the brain measuring the body and what's going on. So you don't need to worry about controlling anything to manage it. So the next one I want to talk about is mild exercise. So mild exercise is a great stress reliever. Most of us know about this, but there's a lot I want to say about exercise, and that is because we sometimes misinterpret what we can and can't do. So mild exercise is like going for a walk. Again, we don't want anything strenuous right now. So here's what happens when the brain triggers a fight or flight response. What happens is it kicks on adrenaline. It kicks out epinephrine, which is adrenaline, and it puts our body into a cardiovascular workout. So if you're a person with a lot of anxiety, doing exercise that is cardiovascular is actually not good for you, because every single time you have an anxiety attack, you're having a cardiovascular workout. And if you have several anxiety attacks a week or even a day, it is actually going to aggravate that adrenal system. So I always say this, mild exercise is just the beginnings of exercise. You never want to go have a strenuous workout when you're in a triggered state. What happens is all the muscles are contracted, and then when you go work those muscles, you're contracting them further, which can cause muscle tears. It can cause, in addition to muscle tears, you can do tendon damage, you can do ligament damage. So it's really important that it's mild, first of all. And second of all, I'm going to make a rule for you that's really clear and easy to follow. Rule number 1 is if you have anxiety, don't do cardiovascular workouts. So if you're in this condition where what's going on right now is stressful for you, and your stress is played out through anxiety, feeling panicky, cut cardiovascular exercise out of your program. Use strength training exercises. So if you look at exercise like yoga, Tai Chi, strength training, if you're using something that squeezes the muscle, this metabolizes norepinephrine, which helps get it out of the system. So if you're a person that has anxiety, you want to do something that's more along the lines of yoga or strength training, push-ups, sit-ups, lifting weights, things like that. If you're a person that suffers depression, this means that your stress response is reducing your adrenaline too much. So if you don't have motivation, if depression is your response to stressful situations, the best thing to do in that scenario is to increase your cardiovascular practices. And you don't need to do a lot. I always talk about 20 minutes of whatever exercise you need to help shift states of consciousness. So if you're stressed, you could go for a walk. You could go do some slow push-ups. Yoga is really great. Tai Chi, Qigong. All of these are really great workouts that are muscle squeezing. And so you're not damaging the muscle in a stress state. This is really super important. Most injuries happen when the body is already in a stress state. So to reduce the risk of injury, try to follow one of those two guidelines when you're coming to exercise. The next one I want to talk about is chores and yard work. I love using chores and yard work. Go ahead. So how often when you're stressed or upset about something does cleaning help? For me, this is huge. Now, a lot of times when I used to get chronic stress, I never wanted to clean. But I learned over time that if I clean something, I feel better. And so I started doing that when I was stressed. Like if I was upset at someone and I was in the state where I was thinking I wanted to pace or things like that, I would clean, and it would always make me feel better. I actually have a story of a time where I did that when I was actually suicidal. I didn't want to leave a messy house, and so I started cleaning, and by the time I was done, I was in a much better space, and I actually had pulled myself out of the suicidal ideation. So it's amazing how powerful the impact of what these do can be on the brain. Yard work is another one people talk about there a lot. I've said this a lot. I've heard a lot of people say it. I just need to go get my hands in the dirt. Right? So getting in and pulling weeds or trimming things. I have this, so where I live, it has a lot of ground cover, but they're high ground covers, and grass grows underneath and pokes up through the ground cover. And so I have this little Zen practice where I'll go out to one of those patches and I'll just pluck one piece of grass at a time. And I have to find the grass. I have to reach down through the ground cover, find the grass at its base, and pull out one at a time. And it is a great meditation practice. So, and I can approach it from any state. So I talk all the time about the fact that we can't meditate from a stress state. That one becomes a meditation practice whether I'm stressed or not. So it becomes a really great practice. Water is another source of comfort. Water is a really great one, and this can be combined with being out doing yard work. One of the things I used to like to do is if I was doing work where I could, like the grass was wet and stuff, I'd walk in my bare feet. Connecting with water can be really important for us. In fact, I had one person talk about they loved mud. Feeling their feet or hands in mud was very soothing. So I'd say, okay, find a place where you can make yourself a mud puddle in your yard or something, a place where you can always go, turn on the hose, add some water, and make mud. Sometimes it feels crazy to go out of our way to do things to help relieve stress states. But the funny thing is that when we do those things, what we're really doing is saying, my health and well-being is most important to me. So it may seem silly to go out and create a mud puddle to stick my feet in the mud. But that is me putting my health and well-being as a priority. To stay in a stress state is so incredibly bad for our bodies. It is so damaging. So to say I'd rather not make a mud puddle because it seems silly is saying that I'm willing to let my body deteriorate. And we're really not. It's just a habit we're in. So water can be approached from a lot of different ways. A lot of times I'll go just drive up the canyon. I live in Utah, so I'm just down the street from many canyons. So sometimes I'll drive up and just sit by the river and listen to the water or stick my feet in the water. Sometimes I will listen to a sound app. I love the sound of rain. And I think it's because I was raised in Utah and we have very little rain here, it being a desert. I just love a good thunderstorm. I absolutely love that. And for a long time, there are a lot of apps you can get that you can create thunderstorms or rain on a window. Another one I love is rain on a tent. I grew up as a camper. And so this is a positive sensory trigger for me. And um, that sound of water is very soothing. So water can approach in a lot of ways. Another thing is we can go take a warm bath or a cold shower or whatever you're into. That, like, some people, that cold water shock is really good. I don't like that. I take super hot showers. And so but I love the hot water. It feels so good and so soothing. I went and bought myself a shower chair so that I could at times just go sit in my shower and just go ahead and let that water pour on me, and it felt so good. So the next one I'm going to talk about is reciting the alphabet backward. Okay, so reciting the alphabet backward is, so what we're approaching here is when we trigger, we're at our youngest stage of development. So we're in a reactive state. Now, that reactive doesn't have to mean that it's a bad reaction, but what we are doing is running according to memory, because like we said, the prefrontal cortex shuts off. And so everything we're doing is kind of an autopilot thing. Now, what's available when we're triggered is usually early development. I have a story I like to share that there was a time where I triggered. My trigger was so bad. When I still had complex PTSD, I had a day where the trigger was so bad I called into work, and it was shortly after I started applying the principle of what I've discovered. So I was applying my theory to see if it'd work. And I was very new to it, so I still had big triggers. I still had panic attacks. I still had PTSD. And so there was one day where I triggered really bad, and I thought, oh wait, this is a trigger. I know this is a trigger. So I called into work and said, I'm going to work from home today. I can't work. I'm too triggered. I can't even leave the house. My digestive system is in complete upheaval, and I can't leave the house, right? I was in a situation where it was just too much to go to work. Because I'll go to work being really sick. I would in the past, but this was just more than I could handle. So I called and said, I'm going to work from home. And what I did is I sat on my bed. I made it really cozy. I did my phase one, and I was creating a safe space for myself. And I sat down and I opened my computer and I thought, I'm just going to go through email. I'll just lay in bed and go through email. And because I had done that before for a stomach infection, I was in bed for 3 months and I just worked from my computer in bed. And so I just thought, okay, I'll just do that today. And I opened my computer and I opened my email and I couldn't read. The only thing I could recognize was the lowercase letter R. Everything else looked cryptic. Now, it was strange because I had my full consciousness, my full faculties. I knew I had a job. I knew I was in my house. I knew all of that. But my ability to read was existing in a part of my brain that had been shut down by the trigger. And it was astounding to me, and it made such a huge impact on understanding how triggers work, that all of a sudden this ability to do this could be taken from me. This happens all the time to people. There may be people that have recited and trained to be in a show or something or speak publicly, and they're all prepared. And then they get on the stage and it all goes away. And they're like, where is it? I lost it. Well, we didn't lose it. It's still in our brain. It's just not accessible in this state. So what reciting the alphabet backwards does is this, two things. The first thing is we still have access to our earliest learning. And so for me that day, it was bad enough that I couldn't read, but I still knew the alphabet. And so doing the alphabet backwards does this. We're accessing something we can access in a triggered state, but now we're complicating it. So if you already know the alphabet backwards, it won't work. But if you don't know the alphabet backwards, accessing something from early development and then making it more complicated begins to start to just do those little sparks in the prefrontal cortex. And again, like I said before, if you can spark the prefrontal cortex, it will start to turn off that amygdala. So this way you can gradually get yourself out of that. So I used reciting the alphabet backwards for so long. There's a second part of that I use. So the second thing we can do if we don't want to use the alphabet is we can do a counting exercise. So like the alphabet, counting we learn at such an early age, we can generally access it. Now what you want to do is do a counting practice that gets more complicated as you go. And this is our brain hack, right? Doing counting. So counting sums is my favorite, which is being able to go 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 2 is 4, 4 + 4 is 8, 8 + 8 is 16. The reason why I love this one is most of us know 1 + 1 is 2. It was early learning enough that we can recall that even when we're stressed. But it gets progressively difficult. I swear the first 1,000 times I did this exercise, I ended up with a different total. By the time I was in the tens of thousands, but you get there quickly. You're in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands quickly. And so now you're trying to remember the numbers and add them at the same time. Now you're not doing this on a piece of paper. You're doing this in your noggin. So you're using your head to do it. And that makes it more complicated. You're not judging yourself. You're not expecting to do it perfect. What you're doing is you're doing it. And if you get to a point where you're like, I don't even remember what my numbers were, you just start over. And eventually the early numbers will become familiar, but you can always continue to a point where you don't know what was next. So this is one of my favorites. So another one, there are several you can do. You can count to 10 as many times as you can, as fast as you can. So it's not a slow count to 10. It's counting to 10 as fast as you can, as many times as you can in a row. Counting random numbers. Count by, here I say by 8s or 12s. You can count by 7s or count by 52s, right? Whatever is a random number that you have to think about to come up with the answer to. Practicing your multiplication tables. Again, start easy. 1 × 1, 1 × 2, and those are all going to be repeated. Then you can go into the 2 × 1, 2 × 2, 2 × 4. Just go through those. This is a really great. Plus, it was a learning stage as a child, and so your brain will be comfortable in it. And if you've ever struggled with math, the math isn't your thing, I mean, there's always, pick an exercise. If there's an exercise I'm talking about that makes things worse, pick something that makes it better. So that not the same thing works for everyone. That is what I'm talking about in my program more than I'm ever talking about when it comes to anything else. My program is about the fact that you do what works for you. The same thing doesn't work for everybody. So this is really about what soothes me when I'm stressed. It's amazing the impact it has. Little simple practices, right? And say you're stressed about work or you're stressed about the earthquakes, right? Doing these practices isn't addressing your stress, the thing you're stressed about. It's not affecting the stressor. You're not going through and figuring out a financial plan, or you're not going through and securing everything in your house so it doesn't fall down. You're actually approaching the brain function, which organically makes you feel better about those things. And that's why I talk about this. that if we approach the brain function, how we experience the event is different. So if you're in a brain function that's triggered, you're going to be stressed during an earthquake. If you're not in a brain function about being triggered, if you feel calm and centered and an earthquake happens, you're going to manage it. You're going to maybe find it curious, or just readily know, okay, I'm going to do this. This is how I'm going to handle that. So let's talk about self-comforting behavior. Um, Deep breathing is really good as well. I'm going to talk about that one just a little bit. I'm really going to connect to that in the meditation on Sunday. So thank you for adding that one, Judy. So self-comforting behavior is the very first level of practice that we learn. We do this when we're a baby. They'll see babies oftentimes will self-soothe by rubbing their own arm. We sometimes rub our forehead when we're stressed. There are a lot of little things that we do. And so self-soothing behavior, I tend to think of as positive sensory trigger. So positive sensory trigger for me falls into the category of sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. So self-soothing behavior can be, again, it can be just rubbing our arms. This babies, so many babies do that. And I know adults that do it too. For a long time, I would just sit and do this when I was stressed. It was really funny. I was talking about that in a meetup, doing that. I would do this when I was stressed. And people said, wow, I've seen you do that. I don't know the last time I did it. I don't think I've done it in a very long time because I just don't have stress anymore. But that's a good one. Touch like that. Also something soft, furniture. I have a couch that's so soft, so I love soft things. So touching anything that's soft is really good. Taste is great. A nice cup of tea. I tend to say with taste, try to be healthy. A lot of us self-soothe with taste, and it becomes food addiction. So try to make sure it's a healthy self-soothing thing. I found a lot of substitutes. So I really have, since the social distancing, I don't keep sweets in my house anymore. And I found I have a couple of teas that seem super sweet to me now. One is an apple cinnamon one, and it has real apples in it, so it's pretty sweet. I'll also buy apples and pears because sugars that have fiber with them are easier for the body to digest. I'm also way into cacao right now. I had never tried cacao before. I didn't know the real big difference between that and cocoa, and I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm getting away from caffeine, and it's a really great substitute. And it's just delicious. Anyway, so hot liquid is soothing to me. So a lot of times I would go for tea or a coffee or something like that. But it can be anything that has a flavor that works for you. Scent is the same. Lighting a candle that you like the scent of, or going outside. Like in the summer, that smell of grass, of fresh cut grass, hearing lawnmowers sound is very soothing to me because I am a summer monger. I love summer. And so sound, again, you can go back to sound apps. You can listening to water, or you can listen to birds chirping, or the sound of Tibetan bells, or, chimes, or whatever works for you. But there are certain things that soothe, and there are certain things that make us more anxious. So figure out what soothes. Sight, again, you know what I really love? There are some videos with meditation music on YouTube, and they have this camera like panning through a forest, and I love them. It's just so amazingly soothing for me to look at nature. And so I have on my Instagram feed, half of it is imagery from like there's travel sites I follow, National Geographic, a lot that are in Scotland that I ended up following the Highland Games, things like that. So things that are soothing to me sight wise. Going outside. Now I'm going to add to this, going from one room to another. When we enter a new point of view, the brain becomes observational. So going outside is great for this. Anytime we pass through a door, it puts us into an observational state. Plus, outside can be soothing. Now, if you're a person that's an introvert and you can't go outside when you're stressed, that's great. You can do cocooning. So I have these kind of together because you can go outside, or you can do cocooning, which is more wrapping yourself in a blanket or your favorite sweater. But doing these things, remembering the places, the environments that make you feel better. You can do the same with distractions. So I have distractions on this list. This is watching TV, a movie, something that just distracts you. A lot of things become addictive. A lot of phase one practices become addictive because they're an externalized source for relieving our stress. Don't worry about that when you're stressed. Just go ahead and go to the distraction. If you're in the program, I always recommend doing a phase two practice right after. But at least do the phase one and relieve the stress state as much as you can. And don't wait till you're really stressed out, or don't wait until the anxiety's so high that you can't manage it. Decide that you're going to instead do something every day, a couple of times a day. If you're most stressed in the morning, do your practices at night before you go to sleep. That's the best time. I've talked about that. There are some sleep meditations and brain hacks on sleep that I've talked about. So check the videos and articles page on our website, inspiredevolutionproject.com, to find those. Those are really good. Other things I mention are coloring practices. Now, coloring practices is really filling in anything with a predefined space. So this can be paint by numbers on your phone. It could be a jigsaw puzzle. I love jigsaw puzzles. I grew up doing jigsaw puzzles. So those they make me happy. Easy craft projects, things like latchet hook rugs, or the looms, the hand looms that you can use. Coloring books is one I recommend. When you're doing a coloring book, I do recommend, and I make these recommendations to cause focus, to cause centering. It doesn't matter to me if you color outside of the lines as a person, but if you try when you're relieving stress to remember to fill each space entirely, stay within the lines. Take your time. Let one page take you a month to fill out. Be meticulous in getting every single spot, because this is concentration that helps your brain function. You're not going to judge your work. You can throw it away when you're done if you want. This is about putting you into a specific brain function. So you're going to, again, take your time. Breath work is good, and so I'm going to lump this into a big category. I have that and a couple more to do, and then we'll be done and finishing up the brain hack for the night. So returning to anything that is natural homeostasis for the body. So long, slow, deep breaths. No hot or fire breath. You want long, slow, deep breaths. Also, anything that takes your body back into the state it is if it's not stressed. So going through and just relaxing your muscles. Self-talk that says, I'm fine, everything's okay, things like that. The things that we run to in the brain for those are very soothing. The deep breath is giving the message to the brain that I don't need to be in fight or flight anymore. Spiritual ritual is really powerful here. This is about connecting to something larger than yourself. If you're not a spiritual person, don't worry about it. Don't try to add that in. All you're doing is, in moments of stress, you're doing your rosary, or you're doing your prayers, or you're doing your mantras, or whatever spiritual ritual you have. Because spiritual ritual specifically is about connecting with something beyond yourself, beyond, I have words here, sorry, I moved down kind of fast. But it's because the fight or flight response is isolating, because we're in social distancing, this is a good way to connect with something bigger than yourself. So if you already have a belief system, you can connect with that system. Reading, I do remind you, keep the reading light. I will go deeper into reading coming up with one of the hacks. You want recreational reading here. Harry Potter, or an audiobook, something you don't have to think too hard to read. Also, think of your own. On the YouTube, these last 20 seconds of the video, when I edit it, I'm going to add a link to the Introduction to Brain Chemistry video 1 through 9. Go check it out on the website. It's a free class, and it will help you completely alter your experience of reality. So that free class is there on the website. There's about to be a free introduction to meditation class on the website. There's a lot of resources there, so you can go for those. But you can click to subscribe on YouTube. That just makes it easier to find. You won't get pinged. You won't get blasted by YouTube unless you hit the little bell notification icon. I hope this gives you everything you need. And however you decide to move forward, I hope each and every one of you has an amazingly brilliant journey. Keep going. It's worth it.